Assalamualaikum, I am Princess Reham M. Haji Ghafoor and I'll be discussing the traditional system of regime classification. So, the traditional system of regime classification focuses on categorizing political systems based on their structure, practices, and the distribution of power within the state. These classifications are rooted in historical and philosophical traditions and typically revolve around distinguishing between different forms of government based on authority, legitimacy, and governance. Now let's talk about the difference between government, political system, and the regimes. So government are the institutions that makes laws and enforce them and interpret them. Think of it as in Congress, parliaments, or courts. While political system is the set of formal and informal institution processes and relationships through which a society organizes itself politically. And now what is regime? So a regime is therefore a system of rule that endures despite the fact that governments come and go, whereas governments can be changed by elections through dynastic successions as a result of coup d'etat. However, regimes can be changed only by military intervention from without or by some kind of revolutionary upheaval from within. So why is it important to classify regimes? There are two reasons. One is to understand so that we can easily compare. Example, how does democracy works in US versus in India, or why authoritarian regimes are more stable like in China. Secondly is to evaluate so that we can judge what's more effective. Like, should countries shift from dictatorship to democracy? Like that. Why we classify political systems? Classification isn't just about understanding different types of government. It's also about evaluating them. For example, Aristotle, a famous philosopher, didn't just want to describe political systems. He also wanted to figure out which one would be the best for society. People like Plato and Thomas More went even further, imagining perfect societies, what we call a utopia. Plato's Republic and More Utopia are examples of books where they suggested ideal systems of government. These ideas were not just about understanding, they were also about improvement, trying to figure out what government should be like. In modern times, we still ask questions like, should a country move from dictatorship to democracy or should India change its federal system? These questions are important for making judgments about how we want countries to be governed. We compare different systems of government to see which ones work better, and sometimes we make suggestions for change. But there are some problems with these classifications. First, when we compare different political systems, we might oversimplify things. For example, countries like the US and India may both be democracies, but they are very different in how they function. If we group them together without understanding the differences, we miss important details. Second, there's the risk of ethnocentrism. This means we might look at other countries through the lens of our own culture and values. For example, in Japan, the idea of the state might be very different from how we understand it in the West. If we judge their system using Western values, we might not understand it properly. Third, when classifying political systems, we often forget that globalization has changed the world. The idea of looking at countries as separate, independent entities is outdated now. Countries are connected in many ways, economically, politically, and socially. So classifying political systems just by looking at individual countries might not give us the full picture. Now let's talk about utopia. A utopia is an ideal society where everything is perfect. Imagine a place where there is no poverty, no violence, and no oppression. Utopian thinkers like Plato and Thomas More used this idea to criticize their own societies and suggest better alternatives. However, the term utopianism is sometimes used in a negative way. People may call it deluded or fanciful thinking, meaning it's an impossible dream. Overall, the classification of political systems helps us understand how governments work, but we should be careful not to oversimplify things or judge other cultures based on our own values. Utopian ideas might inspire us to think about a better world, but we need to be realistic about what is possible. As we move forward in a globalized world, we must also recognize that countries are interconnected, and the old ways of classifying them might not always be enough. That is all. Thank you.